My name is Alexander Rivers and I'm 72 years old. 72 goddamn years on this earth, and I thought, no, I knew, I had figured out this thing called life. I thought I understood my wife, Grace. Hell, I thought I understood myself. But what I discovered when I decided to fake a trip to my brother's place. Christ, it's something that still wakes me up at 3 in the morning, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding like I'm some scared kid afraid of the dark. I never thought I'd be the one sitting here, telling this story to anyone who'll listen. Never thought I'd be that guy, you know the type. The fool. The blind husband. The man who built his entire world on sand and called it bedrock. But here I am, and if my pain, my humiliation, my absolute devastation can warn just one person out there, can help someone avoid walking into the meat grinder I walked into, then maybe, just maybe, this nightmare will have had some purpose. I had everything figured out. That's what I told myself every single morning when I looked in the mirror while shaving. 43 years of marriage. 43 years. Do you know how rare that is these days? In a world where people give up on each other after a few bad months, where, till death do us part, has become more of a suggestion than a vow, Grace and I had made it work. Or so I thought. God, how arrogant I was. How stupidly, painfully arrogant. When I came back from that trip that never happened, when I walked through that door with my heart full of hope and my arms full of roses, I stepped into something I was never, ever prepared for. And I mean never. You can prepare for a lot of things in life. You can prepare for financial hardship. You can prepare for illness. You can even prepare to some extent for death. But you can't prepare for the moment when your entire reality shatters like cheap glass, when everything you believed about your life turns out to be nothing more than a carefully constructed lie. Let me back up. Let me tell you about Grace and me, about the life we built together, because you need to understand what I thought I had before you can understand what I lost. Grace Elizabeth Thornton, that was her maiden name, walked into my life in 1982. I was 29 years old, working as a mechanical engineer for a manufacturing company in Pittsburgh. She was 27, a kindergarten teacher with this smile that could light up a room even on the darkest winter day. We met at a mutual friend's wedding, one of those chance encounters that people write songs about. I asked her to dance, and I swear to God, the moment she put her hand in mine, I knew. I knew she was going to be my wife. We got married a year later in a small church ceremony. Nothing fancy, we didn't have money for fancy back then. But it was beautiful. She was beautiful. In her simple white dress with those flowers in her hair, looking at me like I was the only man in the world, like I hung the moon and stars just for her. I promised her everything that day. I promised her my devotion, my loyalty, my whole heart. And I kept those promises. Every single one of them. For 43 years I kept them. We built a life. We bought a modest house in the suburbs, a 3-bedroom colonial with a yard big enough for the kids we planned to have. And we did have kids. 2 beautiful daughters, Rebecca, born in 1985, and Sarah, born in 1988. I watched Grace transform into this incredible mother, patient and loving and everything I could have hoped for. I worked long hours, sometimes 60 or 70 hours a week, to provide for them, to give them the life they deserved. Grace stayed home with the girls until they started school, then went back to teaching part-time. We had our routines. Sunday dinners with the whole family. Summer vacations to the Jersey Shore. Christmas mornings with the girls tearing into presents while Grace and I watched from the couch, drinking coffee and feeling like we'd won the lottery. We weathered storms together. My father's death, Grace's bout with pneumonia, Rebecca's car accident when she was 16. We survived it all. Together. Or at least that's what I thought. The girls grew up and moved out. Rebecca got married to a good man named Tom, gave us 3 grandchildren. Sarah moved to California for her career. She's some kind of marketing executive now, makes more money than I ever did. Grace and I became empty nesters, just the two of us in that house that suddenly felt too big and too quiet. And that's when things started to change. Slowly at first. So slowly I didn't even notice it happening. Grace started taking up new hobbies. Yoga classes on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. A book club that met every other Wednesday. Volunteer work at the library on Fridays. I was happy for her, you know? I thought it was good that she was finding things to fill her time, building a life beyond just being my wife and the girls' mother. I encouraged it for Christ's sake. I told her to go out, to have fun, to enjoy herself. What kind of fool encourages his own betrayal? But then came the distance. The emotional gap that started opening up between us like a chasm. She stopped asking about my day. I stopped sharing because what was the point if she wasn't listening anyway? Our conversations became transactional. Did you pay the electric bill? What time is your doctor's appointment? Rebecca called, she wants us to come for dinner on Saturday. Nothing real. Nothing deep. Nothing that reminded me of those early days when we'd stay up until 2 in the morning just talking about everything and nothing. Our sex life. God, do I really have to talk about this? Yes, I suppose I do. It's part of the story, part of the pain. It dwindled. Not all at once but gradually. Once a week became once a month, became once every few months, became... Well, it had been nearly a year by the time I hatched my stupid plan. And when we did make love, no, I can't call it that anymore. When we did have sex, it felt mechanical. Like she was going through the motions, fulfilling some obligation. There was no passion, no connection. I felt like I was making love to a stranger who was kind enough to pretend for my sake. I told myself it was normal. We were getting older. People's bodies change. Desires change. After 40 years together, of course the fire dims a little. That's what everyone says, right? That's what all the magazines and the marriage counselors and the self-help books tell you. The passion fades, but it's replaced by something deeper, something more meaningful. Companionship. Partnership. A love that's quieter but stronger. What a load of shit. The truth is, I was lying to myself because the alternative was too terrifying to consider. The alternative was that Grace had stopped loving me. That she had become so disconnected from me, so distant, that we were just two people sharing a house and a last name and nothing else. And I couldn't face that. I couldn't face the possibility that my marriage, my beautiful 43-year marriage, was nothing but a hollow shell. So I made a decision. A decision that seemed romantic and spontaneous at the time, but now, looking back, seems desperate and pathetic. I decided to test her. To see if maybe, just maybe, I was wrong. To see if there was still something there worth fighting for. My brother Curtis lives in Vermont. We'd made plans for me to visit him for a week. We were going to go fishing, play some golf, just two old guys reliving their youth. Grace knew about the trip. She'd helped me pack, for God's sake. She kissed me goodbye at the door and told me to drive safely and to give Curtis her love. But 2 hours into the drive, I turned around. I called Curtis from a rest stop and told him I wasn't coming, that something had come up. He didn't ask questions. Curtis never does. Then I went to a motel about 40 miles from home and checked in for the night. My plan was simple, or at least I thought it was. I'd stay away for a few days, give Grace some space, some time to miss me. Then I'd come home early, surprise her. I'd bring flowers, roses, her favorite, though now I wonder if they ever really were her favorite or if that was just another lie I told myself. I'd take her out to dinner at that Italian place where we had our first date. I'd remind her of what we used to have. I'd reignite that spark that had been fading for so long. God, I was such a fool. Such a blind, stupid fool. I spent 3 days in that motel room. 3 days of bad cable TV and worse coffee, of pacing back and forth and second-guessing myself. Was I being ridiculous? Was I overreacting? Maybe I should just go to Curtis's like I'd planned and stop being so paranoid. But something kept me there. Some instinct, some little voice in the back of my head saying, wait, watch. You need to know the truth. And then came the phone calls. Grace called me twice a day while I was supposedly at Curtis's. How's the fishing? Is Curtis doing okay? Don't forget to take your blood pressure medication. Normal wife things. Caring things. But her voice, there was something off about it. A brightness that seemed forced. A cheerfulness that rang hollow. Like she was playing a part in a play, reading lines she'd memorized but didn't really feel. I started to notice things in the background of our calls. Music playing, not the classical stuff she usually listened to, but pop music, upbeat and young. Laughter. Once, I swear I heard a man's voice asking something I couldn't make out. When I asked who was there, she said it was just the TV. But I knew the sound of a television. That wasn't a television. My suspicions were growing. Festering. Eating away at my gut like acid. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I just sat in that motel room, staring at the water-stained ceiling, imagining scenarios that made me want to vomit. Was she having an affair? After 43 years, was my wife cheating on me? The thought was absurd. Grace wasn't that kind of woman. She was loyal. Faithful. She'd taken vows, for Christ's sake, sacred vows before God and our families. But people change, don't they? People become strangers. The woman who promised to love you forever can wake up one day and decide she doesn't anymore. And maybe she doesn't even tell you. Maybe she just starts living a different life while you're too blind or too trusting or too goddamn stupid to see it. On the 4th day, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know. I had to see for myself what Grace was doing while I was supposedly hundreds of miles away. So I checked out of the motel, bought a dozen red roses from a grocery store and drove home. I timed it for late afternoon, around 4 o'clock. Grace usually made dinner around 5:30, so I figured I'd catch her in the kitchen, maybe starting to prepare the meal. In my head, I'd built up this whole scenario. I'd walk in with the flowers, she'd be surprised and delighted, we'd laugh about the early return, and then we'd spend the evening reconnecting. Talking. Really talking like we used to. Maybe we'd even... Christ, I was delusional. I parked my truck a block away from our house. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me knew what I was going to find and wanted to delay the inevitable. Maybe I just wanted to approach quietly, to maintain the element of surprise. Whatever the reason, I walked that block in the autumn sunshine, carrying those roses, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might have a heart attack right there on the sidewalk. Our house looked normal. The lawn was freshly mowed. I noticed Grace must have paid the neighbor kid to do it. The flower beds were weeded. The front porch was swept clean. Everything looked exactly as it should. Ordinary. Peaceful. Perfect. I let myself in through the front door as quietly as I could. I'm not sure why I was being stealthy. This was my house, for God's sake. I had every right to walk through that door whenever I wanted. But something made me careful. Something made me silent. The house was quiet. No music. No TV. No sounds of cooking from the kitchen. For a moment, I thought maybe Grace wasn't home. Maybe she was out at one of her classes or volunteer sessions, and I'd have to wait for her to return. Part of me was disappointed. Part of me was relieved. And then I heard it. Laughter. Grace's laughter coming from upstairs. But it wasn't the polite chuckle she used during phone calls with friends or the reserved laugh she gave when I told one of my terrible jokes. This was different. This was genuine. Unrestrained. Joyful in a way I hadn't heard in years. My feet carried me to the stairs before my brain caught up. I should have announced myself. I should have called out, "Honey, I'm home," like some character in a sitcom. But I didn't. I climbed those stairs one silent step at a time, the roses clutched in my hand, my heart trying to punch its way out of my chest. The laughter was coming from our bedroom. Our bedroom. The room where we'd made love thousands of times over 4 decades. The room where we'd comforted each other through nightmares and illness. The room where we'd whispered secrets and dreams and promises in the dark. I reached the door. It was partially open. And I looked inside. What I saw. God, how do I even describe it? How do I put into words the moment your entire world collapses? Grace was there. But she wasn't with another man, at least not in the way I'd feared. No, what I saw was somehow worse. Somehow more devastating. She was dancing. Dancing alone in our bedroom, spinning and twirling like a woman half her age, her arms outstretched, her head thrown back in pure, unbridled joy. She was wearing clothes I'd never seen before, a flowing sundress in bright yellow, completely unlike the sensible pants and cardigans she usually wore. Her hair, which she always kept in a neat, practical bun, was down and loose around her shoulders. And she was beautiful. Breathtakingly beautiful. She looked 10 years younger, 20 years younger. She looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with at that wedding in 1982, only better. More vibrant. More alive. The bedroom had been rearranged. Our heavy, dark furniture, the matching set we'd bought when we first got married, was gone. In its place was lighter, brighter furniture. Bohemian. Artistic. The walls, which had been a conservative beige for as long as I could remember, were now painted a warm terracotta. There were plants everywhere, green and lush and thriving. Candles on the dresser. Scarves draped over the mirror. A yoga mat rolled up in the corner. This wasn't our bedroom. This was Grace's bedroom. Her sanctuary. Her private world that I had never been invited into. I stood there, frozen in the doorway, watching my wife dance to music only she could hear. And then she turned and saw me. The joy drained from her face like water from a broken dam. The dancing stopped. Her arms fell to her sides. And for a long, terrible moment we just stared at each other. 2 strangers. 2 people who had shared a life for 43 years but clearly didn't know each other at all. "Alexander," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Not surprised. Not guilty. Just tired. Like she'd been expecting this moment, dreading it, and was almost relieved it had finally come. I wanted to yell. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand answers, to ask what the hell had happened to our bedroom, to our life, to us. But all I could manage was, "I came home early." She nodded slowly, still standing there in that yellow dress I'd never seen, in that room I didn't recognize. "I can see that." What? I looked around the room again at all the changes, all the evidence of a life I knew nothing about. "What is this?" Grace took a deep breath. She walked over to the bed, a new bed I realized with white linens instead of our old navy blue comforter, and sat down. She looked at me with those brown eyes I'd gazed into thousands of times, and I saw something in them I'd never seen before. Or maybe I had seen it and just refused to acknowledge it. Sadness. Deep, bone-weary sadness. And resignation. "This is my life, Alexander," she said quietly. Those 5 words hit me like a physical blow. "Your life? This is our house. Our bedroom. Our life." She shook her head. "No. It was our life. For a very long time it was our life. But somewhere along the way, I don't know when exactly, it became just your life. And I was just a supporting character in it." I dropped the roses. They fell to the floor with a pathetic little thud, scattering petals on the hardwood. "What the hell are you talking about? I've given you everything. 43 years, Grace. 43 years of my life, of my love, of my devotion. How dare you say this was just my life? You gave me everything you thought I should want," she said, and there was no anger in her voice, no heat. Just that terrible, calm sadness. "You gave me a house and financial security and children and a respectable life. And I'm grateful for those things, Alexander. I truly am. But you never asked what I wanted. You never asked what my dreams were. You just assumed that your dreams were our dreams." I felt like I was drowning. Like the floor had opened up beneath me and I was falling into some dark abyss. "I don't understand. We built this life together. We made decisions together." "Did we?" Grace stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the backyard where we'd pushed the girls on swings, where we'd had birthday parties and barbecues and all those moments that I thought were the building blocks of a happy marriage. "When you took that job that required 70-hour weeks, did you ask me if that's what I wanted? When we bought this house in the suburbs, did you ask me if this is where I wanted to live? When you decided how we'd spend our money, our time, our lives, did you ever really ask what I wanted? You never said anything." My voice was rising now, pain and confusion morphing into anger. "If you were unhappy, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you tell me?" She turned back to face me and I saw tears on her cheeks. But she was smiling. Actually smiling. A sad, bitter smile that cut me deeper than any knife. "I did, Alexander. So many times. But you didn't hear me. Or maybe you heard but you didn't listen. You were always so sure you knew what was best. So confident that the life you wanted was the life we both wanted." My mind was reeling, grasping for something solid, something real. "The girls? You loved being their mother. I saw how happy you were." "I did love it," she agreed. "Being a mother was one of the greatest joys of my life. But it wasn't the only thing I was. It wasn't the only thing I wanted to be. And when they grew up and left, I realized I had spent so long being a wife and a mother that I'd forgotten how to be Grace. Just Grace. The woman who existed before marriage and children and all those roles I was supposed to play." "So you've been playing some kind of role with me? All these years it's been an act." "No," she said firmly. "It wasn't an act. I loved you, Alexander. I still love you in a way. But I'm not in love with you anymore. I haven't been for a long time. And I think if you're honest with yourself, you'll admit you're not in love with me either. You're in love with the idea of me. The wife you think you're supposed to have. The marriage you think you're supposed to want." I shook my head violently, refusing to accept it. "That's not true. I love you. I've always loved you." "You love the Grace who cooks your dinner and keeps your house clean and asks about your day," she said. "You love the Grace who doesn't ask too many questions or demand too much attention or want things you can't give her. But the real me, the woman I am underneath all that, you don't know her at all. You've never wanted to. How can you say that?" I was shouting now, all pretense of control gone. "I've devoted my entire life to you. To this marriage. And you're telling me it meant nothing? That I meant nothing?" "It meant something," Grace said quietly. "It meant a lot. We raised 2 beautiful daughters. We built a stable, comfortable life. We had good times, Alexander. I'm not denying that. But good isn't enough anymore. I can't spend the rest of my life, however many years I have left, just going through the motions. Pretending to be satisfied with good when I could have." She gestured around the room at the colors and the life and the joy she'd created without me. "When I could have this." I looked around again, really looked this time. At the paintings on the walls, abstract, colorful, nothing like the landscape prints we'd had before. At the books stacked on the new nightstand, poetry, philosophy, memoirs by women I'd never heard of. At the collection of crystals and candles and strange little objects that seemed to have meaning I couldn't understand. This was who Grace really was. This creative, vibrant, spiritual woman who had been hiding underneath the sensible wife and mother exterior. And I had never seen her. Never even looked for her. "When did this happen?" I asked, my voice breaking. "When did you stop loving me?" She considered the question for a long moment. "I don't think there was a specific moment. It was gradual. Like a photograph fading in the sun, so slowly you don't notice until one day you look at it and realize the colors are gone. The girls went to college and suddenly I had time to think. To remember who I was before marriage, before motherhood. To imagine who I could still be. I started taking those yoga classes not just for exercise but because it made me feel connected to my body again, to myself. I joined the book club because I'd forgotten how much I loved reading, really reading, books that made me think and feel and question. I volunteered at the library because I wanted to be around ideas and art and culture. And I wasn't part of any of that, I said dully. I tried to include you, Grace said. Remember when I asked you to come to yoga with me? You laughed and said that was woman stuff. When I tried to talk to you about the books I was reading, you said you didn't have time for that artsy nonsense. When I suggested we take a pottery class together or go to the museum, you said we could just watch TV instead. You weren't interested in the things that were becoming important to me. You were happy with our routine, our comfortable rut. But I wasn't. I was suffocating. Each word was a hammer blow, cracking the foundation of everything I thought I knew. So you just, what? Started living this secret life? Changed our bedroom into your personal sanctuary without even telling me? You were supposed to be gone for a week, she said. I was going to change it back before you. Got home. This room, this space, it was just for me. Just a week where I could live the way I wanted, surround myself with things that brought me joy, be the person I really am instead of the person you needed me to be. A week, I repeated. You were going to give yourself 1 week of being yourself and then go back to pretending for the rest of the year? For the rest of your life? That's insane, Grace. Is it? She asked. Is it any more insane than spending 43 years slowly losing yourself? Then waking up one morning at 70 years old and realizing you've never actually lived the life you wanted? That you've spent your entire existence playing a role in someone else's story? The pain in her voice was real. Raw. And it made me angry because it meant this wasn't just about her being selfish or having some kind of midlife crisis. This was real suffering. She had been suffering, and I had been too wrapped up in my own contentment to notice. What about the phone calls? I asked, my voice hoarse. When I called you from Curtis's place, who was here? I heard someone. A man. For the first time, Grace looked uncomfortable. That was Daniel. He's my friend. From the book club. Friend? I said flatly. The word tasted like poison. What kind of friend? The kind who listens to me, she said. The kind who's interested in what I think and feel. The kind who sees me as a person, not just a wife or a mother or a housekeeper. Are you sleeping with him? The question came out before I could stop it, sharp and ugly. Grace met my eyes steadily. No. But I've thought about it. I've thought about what it would be like to be with someone who truly sees me, who wants to know the real me. And I feel guilty about those thoughts, Alexander, but not as guilty as I should. Because thinking about being with someone else makes me feel more alive than I've felt in years with you. I wanted to hit something. Break something. My hands were shaking with rage and hurt and a grief so deep I thought it might swallow me whole. So what now? Are you leaving me? Is that what this is? After 43 years, you're just going to walk away? I don't know, she said, and the honesty in her voice was somehow worse than any lie would have been. I've been trying to figure out what to do. Part of me wants to leave, to finally be free to live the life I want without guilt or obligation. But another part of me is terrified. I'm 70 years old. I have grandchildren. What kind of grandmother abandons her family? What would Rebecca and Sarah think? What would people say? So you're staying because of what people would think? I asked bitterly. Not because you love me or want to be with me, but because you're worried about your reputation? I'm staying because I don't know what else to do, she shouted, and it was the first time she'd raised her voice. I'm trapped, Alexander. Trapped between the life I have and the life I want. Trapped between the promises I made 43 years ago and the reality of who I am now. Trapped between duty and desire, between should and want, between the woman I was supposed to be and the woman I actually am. We stood there, facing each other across the ruins of our marriage, both of us breathing hard. The roses I'd dropped were scattered on the floor between us, their red petals already starting to wilt. A romantic gesture turned to garbage. A perfect metaphor for everything we'd become. I can't believe this is happening, I said, my voice cracking. I can't believe that after everything we've been through, after building a whole life together, you're telling me you want something else. Someone else. I don't want someone else, Grace said wearily. I want myself. I want to know who Grace Thornton was before she became Grace Rivers. I want to find out what makes me happy instead of just doing what makes everyone else happy. I want to live, Alexander. Really live. Before it's too late. The words hung in the air between us, and I realized with a sickening clarity that this wasn't something I could fix. This wasn't a problem I could solve with flowers or dinner dates or romantic gestures. This was fundamental. This was Grace realizing she'd spent her entire adult life being someone she wasn't, and me realizing I'd spent that same life with a woman I never truly knew. So what do we do? I asked, finally, defeated. Grace sat back down on the bed, her bed in her room, in the life she'd built without me. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I think we need to be honest with each other. Really honest, maybe for the first time in decades. I couldn't stay in that room anymore. Couldn't stand there surrounded by evidence of how little I knew my own wife, how completely I'd failed to see her pain. I turned and walked out, leaving the roses where they'd fallen, walking down the stairs and out the front door like a man in a dream. A nightmare. I got in my truck and drove. I don't even remember where I went. I just drove for hours, the sun setting and the darkness falling, my mind replaying every conversation, every moment, every sign I'd missed over the years. How had I been so blind? How had I convinced myself everything was fine when it clearly wasn't? The answer, I realized as the miles passed beneath my tires, was that I'd been comfortable. Satisfied with my life, my routine, my understanding of how things were supposed to be. I'd stopped paying attention because I thought I didn't need to. Grace was just there. Like the furniture or the house or the car. A constant. Something I could take for granted. And now I was paying the price for that complacency. I ended up at a bar on the edge of town, a dive I'd never been to before where nobody knew me. I ordered a whiskey and then another, trying to dull the pain that was tearing me apart from the inside. But alcohol doesn't work like that, does it? It just makes everything sharper, more vivid. Every word Grace said replayed in my head with perfect clarity. Every truth she'd spoken carved itself deeper into my soul. She wasn't in love with me anymore. Maybe she hadn't been for years. Maybe she'd never been in love with the real me, only the version of me she thought she was supposed to love. The provider. The husband. The father. The role I played as naturally as breathing. But who was I underneath that role? Who was Alexander Rivers when you stripped away all the titles and responsibilities? I didn't know. I'd never bothered to find out because I thought the role was enough. I thought being a good husband and father and provider was all I needed to be. I was wrong. I didn't go home that night. I got a motel room, not the same one I'd stayed in before, a different one, seedier, in a part of town I'd never been to. I lay on the scratchy sheets in the dark, staring at the water-stained ceiling, and let myself cry for the first time since my father's funeral 20 years ago. I cried for Grace and the life she'd never gotten to live. I cried for myself and the marriage I'd thought was solid but turned out to be built on sand. I cried for all the years we'd wasted going through the motions, playing our parts, pretending to be happy. But mostly I cried because I realized she was right. About all of it. I wasn't in love with Grace, not the real Grace, the one I'd seen dancing in that transformed bedroom. I was in love with my wife, the concept, the role she played in my life. The woman who took care of me and supported me and never asked for too much. That woman didn't exist. Maybe she never had. The next morning I drove back home. The house was quiet. Grace's car was in the driveway, but when I went inside she wasn't there. The bedroom had been changed back, our old furniture restored, the terracotta walls painted over with fresh beige, the plants and candles and scarves all gone like they'd never existed. Like that vibrant, joyful woman I'd seen dancing had been a hallucination. There was a note on the kitchen table in Grace's neat handwriting, "Gone to Rebecca's for a few days. We both need time to think." Gee, time to think. As if thinking would solve anything. As if we could think our way back to love or forward to some new understanding. But she was right. We did need time. Space. Distance from each other to figure out what the hell we were going to do with the rest of our lives. I spent those days alone in the house, wandering from room to room like a ghost haunting his own life. I looked at our wedding photos, so young, so hopeful, so sure we knew what we were doing. I looked at pictures of the girls when they were little, Grace and me smiling behind them, playing the part of the happy family. Had it all been an act? Or had there been real love once, real connection, that had just faded away without either of us noticing? I thought about the man I'd been at 29, asking Grace to dance at that wedding. What would that man think if he could see me now? Would he be disappointed? Would he understand? Would he have done anything differently? I thought about Daniel, this man from the book club who saw Grace in ways I never had. I hated him with a burning intensity even though I'd never met him, even though Grace said they weren't sleeping together. He represented everything I'd failed to be, attentive, interested, curious about who Grace really was beneath the surface. and I thought about the future. What it would look like if Grace and I stayed together, both of us miserable and unfulfilled, going through the motions until one of us died. What it would look like if we separated, divorced, became one of those elderly couples who couldn't make it work. The shame. The gossip. The pain we'd cause our daughters and grandchildren. Neither option seemed bearable. Grace came home on the fourth day. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. The same table where we'd shared thousands of meals, where we'd helped the girls with homework, where we'd made plans and decisions and built our life together. "I've been thinking," she said. "So have I. This isn't your fault," she continued. "I want you to know that. You didn't do anything wrong, Alexander. You were exactly the husband you thought you should be. The husband you were taught to be. You provided for us, protected us, gave us a good life. That's not nothing. But it's not enough," I finished for her. She nodded sadly. "It's not enough. Not for me. Not anymore." "So what do we do?" I asked, echoing the question from before, still hoping for an answer that didn't exist. "I think." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I think we need to be honest about what we both want. Not what we think we should want. Not what would make our children happy or what would look good to our friends. What we actually truly want." "I want my wife back," I said. "The woman I married. The life we built." Grace shook her head. "That woman doesn't exist anymore, Alexander. Maybe she never did. And that life, it was good for you, but it was killing me. Slowly. Every day, a little bit more of me died trying to be the woman you needed." Her words were knives, each one finding its mark in my heart. "So you want a divorce?" "I don't know what I want," she admitted. "I'm terrified of leaving. Terrified of what people will say, of hurting you and the girls, of being alone. But I'm also terrified of staying. Of waking up in 5 years or 10 years, if I even have that long, and realizing I wasted the rest of my life being miserable." We sat in silence for a long time. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking the seconds, the minutes, the hours of our life together ticking away. "Tell me about him," I said finally. "Daniel." "Who is he?" Grace looked surprised. "Why does it matter?" "Because I need to understand what he gives you that I don't. I need to know what I failed to be." She sighed. "He's a retired art professor. He's 68, a widower. He lost his wife to cancer 3 years ago. He joined the book club because he was lonely and wanted to meet people who shared his interests." "And you bonded over books," I said bitterly. "We bonded over loss," she corrected. "He understood what it was like to feel alone even when you're surrounded by people. To have this whole inner life that nobody sees or cares about. We'd talk after the meetings, just the two of us, about poetry and philosophy and art. About what it means to live an authentic life. About regrets and dreams and all the things we wished we'd done differently." "Did you tell him about me?" "Yes. I told him I was married. That I'd been married for over 40 years to a good man who loved me. But I also told him that I felt invisible in my own life. That I'd spent so long being a wife and mother that I'd forgotten how to be just me." "And what did he say?" Grace smiled slightly, a sad, wistful smile. "He said I should paint my bedroom terracotta. That I should fill it with things that brought me joy. That I should spend at least 1 hour every day doing something just for myself. Something that fed my soul instead of feeding everyone else. He said life is too short to spend it all in service to other people's expectations." "Sounds like a real philosopher," I said sarcastically. "He is," Grace said simply. "He's thoughtful and introspective and interested in ideas. He asks me questions about what I think, what I feel, what I dream about. When I talk he listens, really listens. Not just waiting for his turn to speak or thinking about something else. He makes me feel seen, Alexander. For the first time in decades, someone sees me." The pain of those words was excruciating. Because I knew she was right. I had stopped seeing her years ago. She'd become part of the scenery, part of the routine. I'd stopped asking questions because I thought I knew all the answers. I'd stopped being curious about her inner life because I assumed I understood it. I'd failed her. Completely and utterly failed her. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "I'm sorry I didn't see you. I'm sorry I wasn't interested in your thoughts and dreams. I'm sorry I made you feel invisible." "I know you are," Grace said gently. "But sorry doesn't change the past. It doesn't give me back all those years I spent being someone I wasn't. It doesn't make me young again or give me more time to figure out who I really am. What if?" I swallowed hard. "What if we started over? What if I promised to really see you now, to be interested in your life, to support the real you instead of the version I wanted you to be?" Grace looked at me with such profound sadness that I knew the answer before she spoke. I appreciate that, Alexander. I really do. But I don't think you can change who you are any more than I can go back to being who I was. We're both too old, too set in our ways. And honestly, I don't think I have the energy to teach you how to love the real me. I'm exhausted from pretending for so long. I just want to be myself without having to explain or justify or apologize for it. So that's it then, I said, my voice hollow. 43 years and we're just done. I don't know if we're done, she said. But I know we can't keep going the way we have been. Something has to change. Either you have to accept that I'm going to start living my own life, taking classes, pursuing my interests, spending time with people who share my passions, or we need to separate. Those are the only two options I can see. The thought of separation, of divorce, made me feel sick. But the thought of staying married while living completely separate lives seemed just as bad. Maybe worse. I need time, I said. Take all the time you need, Grace replied. But know this, I'm done hiding. I'm done pretending. I'm done living my life according to what other people think I should want or be. Whether you're part of my future or not, I'm going to start being honest about who I am and what I want. I've wasted too many years already. She got up from the table and walked toward the stairs. At the doorway she paused and looked back at me. For what it's worth, Alexander, I did love you. What? When we were young and everything seemed possible. But we grew in different directions, and instead of talking about it or working through it, we just coasted. We let the distance grow until we became strangers living in the same house. That's not all your fault. It's mine too. I should have spoken up sooner. I should have demanded to be seen. But I didn't, and now here we are. She left me sitting at the kitchen table, and I heard her footsteps going up the stairs, heard the bedroom door close. Our bedroom. Her bedroom. I didn't even know anymore. That was 6 months ago. 6 months of the most agonizing, confusing, painful period of my entire life. And you want to know what we decided? We didn't. We're still married, still living in the same house, but we might as well be roommates. Grace has her life, her classes and her book club and her volunteer work and her friendship with Daniel that I try very hard not to think about. I have my life, my routines and my television programs and my trips to visit Curtis that are real now, not fake tests of my wife's loyalty. We're polite to each other. Cordial even. We still have dinner together sometimes, though the conversation is stilted and awkward. We still maintain appearances for the girls and the grandchildren, putting on a united front during family gatherings. But the intimacy is gone. The connection is gone. We're just two old people who happen to share an address. And the worst part? The part that keeps me awake at night, staring at the ceiling in the guest room where I sleep now? I understand her. I hate that I understand her, but I do. She's right about everything. I did fail to see her. I did make assumptions about what she wanted without ever really asking. I did become complacent, taking her for granted because I thought our marriage was solid enough to withstand anything. I was wrong. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd just gone to Curtis's place like I planned. If I'd never come home early, never seen Grace dancing in that transformed bedroom, never learned the truth about her secret life. Would we have continued on, both of us pretending, until one of us died? Would that have been better or worse than this limbo we're in now? I don't have an answer. What I do know is that marriage, real marriage, not the fairy tale version they sell you when you're young and stupid, is hard. It requires constant attention, constant effort, constant curiosity about the person you're with. You can't just assume you know someone because you've been with them for 40 years. People change. Dreams change. What made someone happy at 30 might not make them happy at 70. And if you're not paying attention, if you're not actively engaged in your partner's life and growth and evolution, you wake up one day and realize you're living with a stranger. A stranger who has every right to want more, to demand more, to finally prioritize their own happiness after decades of putting everyone else first. I failed Grace. That's the truth I have to live with. I failed to see her, to hear her, to value her as more than just a wife and mother. I failed to be curious about who she really was beneath the role she played. And now I'm paying the price for that failure. Loneliness, regret, and the knowledge that I wasted 43 years building a life with someone I never truly knew. So here I am, 72 years old, sharing my story with whoever will listen. Not for sympathy, I don't deserve it. But maybe as a warning. If you're married, if you're in a long-term relationship, don't make my mistake. Don't assume you know your partner just because you've been together a long time. Don't stop asking questions. Don't stop being curious. Don't take their presence in your life for granted. Because one day you might come home early from a trip that never happened and discover that the person you thought you knew best in the world is actually a complete stranger. And by then, it might be too late to do anything about it except regret all the years you wasted not really seeing them. Grace is upstairs right now, probably in that bedroom she transformed back to what it was before, what I wanted it to be. I wonder if she's happy with the compromise we've made, this strange arrangement where we're married but not really together. I wonder if she thinks about leaving, about finally having the courage to walk away and live the life she's always wanted. I wonder if Daniel makes her laugh the way I used to before I stopped trying. I wonder if she dances for him the way she danced that day with pure joy and freedom in life. Mostly, I wonder what I could have done differently. How I could have been better. When, exactly, I stopped being the man she fell in love with and became just another obligation in her life. These are the questions that haunt me. These are the truths I live with every day. This is the price of my complacency, my arrogance, my failure to truly see the woman I promised to love forever. And this is my warning to you: don't be me. Don't wait until it's too late to really see your partner. Don't assume that the life you want is the life they want too. Don't take love for granted just because it's been there for a long time. Because love, real love, the kind that lasts, requires attention. It requires effort. It requires you to keep falling in love with the person your partner is becoming, not just the person they were when you met them. I failed to do that. And now I'm living with the consequences. A marriage that exists in name only, a wife who's a stranger, and a future that looks like nothing I'd imagined when I stood at that altar 43 years ago and promised forever. Forever is a long time. Long enough to lose yourself. Long enough to lose each other. Long enough to realize that all the years you thought you were building something lasting were really just years of slow, imperceptible decay. That's my story. That's my truth. That's the price I'm paying for thinking I knew everything, for taking the most precious thing in my life for granted. My name is Alexander Rivers, I'm 72 years old, and I thought I knew my wife. I was wrong. If you've ever been through something like this, or if you're watching this right now and thinking about your own relationships, hit the like button. Please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from and if you've ever faced a painful truth like this. I want to know your stories. And remember, don't wait too long to face the truth in your own life.